I know blood. It has stained my blade on countless battlefields, from the wide plains of Eros to the fiery mountains of Kaladesh, to the treacherous swamps of Innistrad. These are all really dumb names, by the way. I have seen the blood of my allies spilled, my friends, even my loved ones, spilled on the field of battle, and a warning to you. Their sacrifice serves only to temper my rage and sharpen my steel. To know my name is to know vengeance, and my name is Deathblade Predator.
Oh, no, it's not, bro. They totally changed it. You haven't heard?
Wait, really? Well, what is it now?
Graveblade Marauder.
What? That's a far less fear-inspiring name. Why did they even change it?
Well, it's probably all the jokes. It turns out you can't put Predator and Death Touch on the same card without people starting to make, like, To Catch a Deathblade Predator jokes.
Sacre bleu! How crass!
Oh, no, that's not even the best one. The best one is probably Show Me on the Doll Where He Death Touched You. That's classic. That's hilarious. Hey, why are you French, anyway?
How we cope. I am best friends with Cooper Sephiroth and Dr. Wily, always smiley, but my thoughts are red just like my Ozzy. Yeah, we get it.
What is up, my wizards? Dev, back again from that place down there with the magic stuff. So, yeah, today is something we've gotten an awful lot of response for. Way more than I thought we would. This is Sultai Zoo, Sidisi Zoo, if you will, and it's got a lot of stuff going on in it. Let's go ahead and check it out. It's freaking crazy. Let me go ahead and shoot you the creatures here. There are 30 of them in this deck, so let's get started. We have 3 copies of Elvish Mystic, because we're playing an awful lot of 3-drops in this deck. I mean, a litany of 3-drops in this deck, so it really helps to be able to play them on turn 2. I don't want to go the full playset of Elvish Mystic, but it is pretty important that we have some ramp so we can gain a little bit more initiative. It's great when we can play any of these creatures on the second turn, our 3-drops, so this helps us get there, definitely. I mean, you know, Elvish Mystic, it's good. For Satyr Wayfinder, you knew you'd see him because this is a Sultai deck. I mean, everything plays him. You see Abzan play him, you see Green-Red play him, you see Green Devotion play him, he's in everything. So, yes, playset. 4 copies of Den Protector, Dr. Pepper. Yeah, this guy started off as a 3 of. Really want to see him all the time, so I gave him a full playset here. Really does a lot for us. We're dropping an awful lot of cards into our graveyard, so beyond the, Den Protector loop, which does happen, beyond the Deathmist Raptor tricks, which do happen as well, this guy just does crazy stuff for us. We're constantly wayfindering stuff in the graveyard. We have Communw with the Gods, other ways of doing that, Sidisi, obviously. So really gotta have Den Pro. Honestly, he's just ridiculous. 2 copies of Speak of the Devil, Deathmist Raptor right here. This started off as a 4 of and actually climbed its way down. We are cycling through our library fairly quickly. We have more than a few ways of doing it, so it's very, we'll see a lot of Deathmist Raptors, Even with just the 2 of, we'll usually see at least 1 in a game because we're digging an awful lot. I shouldn't go on about it, he's definitely in this shell, no questions asked. 2 copies of Courser of Kruphix. Notice that all these creatures are green so far. Very green heavy deck here. Although I don't entirely think he's a necessity. We're not running much removal, and it's great to have a 2nd or 3rd turn 4 toughness body that helps us gain life back and get our drops. Really good. Helps us make up for the sort of non-existence in this deck of Sylvan Caryatid. A lot of Abzan decks, see Abzan Control does play Caryatid, but a lot of Abzan decks don't. A lot of Sultai decks that already exist in the format don't play it. A lot of other decks don't play the stinking thing. So I just don't think it's entirely necessary to play Caryatid, especially considering we're mostly a 2-color deck. We only run a couple of blue cards. So we don't necessarily need Caryatid, although I do think we need Elvish Mystic. We are playing 1 copy of Nissa in this deck. Really awesome, we're playing, obviously, Whip of Erebos in this thing, and she's really good to whip back into play. Go get your land, put it out, flip her if you've got 7 at that point, and then you don't have to worry about exiling her after that. She's a Planeswalker now. So there is that. It's just, whip them and flip them, baby. Speaking of Planeswalkers, 2 copies of Liliana, Heretical Healer, here. Yeah, lots of tricks with this thing in this deck, man. Lots of tricks. You'll notice that I'm throwing a lot of Magic Origins cards at the wall to sort of see what sticks here, especially as we go on into the deck. And a lot of it does in fact stick. Liliana doesn't look like she belongs at first, but she very much does. I mean, especially her negative X ability is really good once she flips. There's some cool stuff you can do. 2 copies of Nantuko Husk, who almost didn't make the deck, but as I started testing, like, Nantuko Husk is really, really, really good in this. Again, with Liliana, we can sacrifice a dude to Nantuko Husk, flips Liliana, we can then eat the things she leaves behind, and then if we want to, we can neg-X Liliana, bringing back the first thing we ate with Nantuko Husk onto the battlefield. So, a lot of cool stuff we can do, great interactions with Liliana there. Graveblade Marauder, we're playing him in this deck. You can sacrifice your dudes to the bug and put them in your graveyard for Marauder. That's a thing. Pharika, we are playing 1 copy of that in this deck. You can sacrifice your dudes and then Pharika them, you know, back into play, or at least get tokens, you know. Lots of stuff, you know, Sidisi, you can eat those tokens. You can eat old Civic Wayfinders you're not using, you just got laying around. So I really like Nantuko Husk in this deck, definitely. We're not that worried about putting creatures in the graveyard. We can get them back. 1 copy of Nyx Weaver. The spider is good. It's a redundant effect with Den Protector that's really, really nice. And if Sidisi's in play, sort of helps us get more zombies. That's pretty awesome. I like that a lot. So there's a lot of stuff going for Nyx Weaver here, but I don't think he's totally essential. Do like the 1-of though, and we see him a lot. We can get him with our Commune with the Gods if we have to. A lot of stuff we can do. I really like the interactions that Nyx Weaver has, but I don't think he's incredibly essential to play. And a lot of our other 3-drops sort of trump him in the initiative category at least. 1 copy of Pharika, you heard me mention her. Again, we're putting creatures in the graveyard like crazy here, so Pharika's ability is really good. Not to mention regenerating a fair amount of especially green devotion, so we can turn her on fairly easily. A lot of cool stuff to say about Pharika here. I at least want to play the 1 copy. I could understand if you wanted to play more. It's a very, very good card in this deck. 3 copies of Graveblade Marauder. Like I said, we're putting a ton of creatures in the graveyard here. And he's honestly, a lot of the times, one of the things your opponent is most worried about, but then he has to let through, you know, Deathmists and Nantuko Husks that are huge. They have to worry about Nantuko Husks. They got to worry about Pharika if it's turned on. Other Graveblade Marauders, because you might get multiples. Sidisi's a huge creature. There's a lot of stuff they have to worry about in this deck. So many threats, because, you know, again, we're a zoo deck. If they let through Marauder, it's going to do a lot of damage. So, and I almost played Nylea in this deck to give him trample, and we can turn on Nylea really, really easily. So I wanted to do so much with this, but I didn't want to center the entire deck or anything around Marauder, because that's foolhardy. But he's really good. And he keeps coming back, too. We got thousands of ways to get creatures back once they go into the graveyard. So, I mean, he's really hard to get rid of, just like everything else in the deck. So, big threat here. 3 copies of the HBIC around these parts. This is Sidisi. Honestly, man, Sidisi is nuts. Do love Sidisi. She's the whole reason for the deck, and she facilitates everything we're trying to do very well. Not to mention, she's a big person, she's a big creature. So that's good, too. Good card. Good card. That's why we're making the deck. Still not done with the creatures. We got 2 more here. 1 copy of Tasigur in this deck, because we would like to play Tasigur, I think. I don't see why not. I mean, again, we're putting so many cards in the graveyard, blah, blah, blah. Why go on about Tasigur? I think he's perfect for this. This is Torrent Elemental, and I did the curve out of order on purpose there because I wanted to save this for last. Torrent Elementals are really, really good. We're generating a lot of zombies off of Sidisi. We're making huge Nantuko Husks. We have huge Graveblade Marauders once they hit for damage. So if we can Torrent Elemental and just get it into play 1 time, just whip it into play, you know, Torrent Elemental is really good. It hardly ever goes away. And note, we often don't have to pay blue mana for this. We either whip it out of our graveyard or use its actual, you know, ability to pay black or green mana for it, put it right on the battlefield. So we don't even have to have the blue mana for this necessarily. It's really just Sidisi. I just really, really, really like this card in this deck, especially with things like Nantuko Husk and Graveblade Marauder just hanging around. This thing's crazy. On to what little spells we have. There's 2 copies of Commune with the Gods here. Yeah, I could have played, Gather the Pack, but that only gets creatures, and we're not going to activate the Spell Mastery very often. This will help us get enchantments too, which helps us get our whip, which is, we need to do that. We need to see our whip as often as possible. Love Commune with the Gods, let's play it. It is good for what we're doing here. Speaking of, 2 copies of Whip of Erebos here. It started off as just the 1. I really want to see it all the time, which we will see it. We can get out of the graveyard with Den Protector, Nyx Weaver if it happens to go into the graveyard. There's lots of stuff we can do. Obviously, we're going to Commune with the Gods to get this. We'll sometimes draw into it because there are 2 in the deck. Whip really facilitates everything that the deck wants to do. Sidisi and other things, Wayfinder will drop cards into the graveyard. We can then reanimate them just for a turn a lot of the time, but always good. But giving all of our creatures lifelink is crazy because we're playing 30 effing creatures, so there is that too. Whip, good. You knew we'd be playing it. And finally, 2 copies of Collected Company here. Almost every single one of our creatures outside of Sidisi, Torrent Elemental, and Tasigur are all 3-drops, so really helps us have Collected Company. Started off as a playset, but honestly, we don't need to see it too much. We're dumping a lot of cards into our graveyard, and not many of our things have, enter the battlefield effects necessarily, so Collected Company isn't a must. At least a playset, but it is great to see this. Good to get 2 creatures at the same time. Really good when you get certain things. Don't really want to see Den Protector that much with this, obviously, but lots of cool stuff we can do. I mean, no one's denying that. We're playing so many 3-drops and under in this deck that Collected Company. Here are the lands. The only thing I really want to point out here is the Rogue's Passage. Obviously, this helps huge Nantuko Husk and Graveblade Marauder get through. Sometimes goes to your graveyard. You can get it right back with Den Protector or Nyx Weaver. So 1 isn't actually too little. You will see it over the course of the game a lot of the times with how many cards we're dumping into the graveyard, but I can understand playing more because Rogue's Passage is so good in this. And here's our board. This is where all the removal is here against aggro decks, which we will see, I think, a fair amount of in this format. We really need a lot of this removal, especially the language. We're very resilient, so we're not that worried about killing our own dudes with spells, but we need some removal against some decks. And finally, here's the power rankings while I talk for just a second about what I wanted to play. Obviously, like I said, Sylvan Caryatid didn't make the cut. Really wanted to make Soul Flayer work because we have a creature with lifelink in Liliana. We have 2 creatures with Death Touch. So Soul Flayer could be really cool, but in the end just felt a little casual, wasn't quite fast enough for the most part. In the end, just really couldn't make it work no matter how much I wanted to, and I really wanted to. Also, Whisperwood Elemental didn't make the cut. He very much could, I think, but just felt a little out of place. Boon Satyr. This Boon Satyr is awesome, but just didn't feel quite right again. Just some of the stuff just felt like it didn't quite belong. And then finally, I wanted to play some Delve cards. Treasure Cruise was on my docket, and also wanted to play Murderous Cut, just at least a one of. But Delve just really doesn't work with what we're trying to do here. We want as many creatures in the graveyard as possible. Not just for Marauder, we want to be able to bring them back with like Den Protector and stuff like that. And doesn't have good synergy either. Delve doesn't with Deathmist Raptor. So just altogether wasn't a huge fan of the Delver cards. Although I could still see the one Murderous Cut. I could, as a sort of a break in case of emergency. I could get that. This is one of those decks that does a lot of things fairly well, but nothing terribly awful. We're low in the defense category here. That's our lowest stat, mostly because we're not running really any removal outside of the sideboard. We're not running that much removal. We do have creatures with Death Touch and other ways to sort of deal with things. We can bring things back. We counter other removal very well, which is why our resilience stat is so high. Other things, all the 7s is actually a sign of a very well-rounded deck that does an awful lot of things. The last thing I want to say about this deck before I go out here is that I have tested with the deck for 3 or 4 days now against a couple of things, and I still haven't found all the little things the deck does. There's so many little interactions, little synergies that happen. I've already told you about a few of them, most of them involving Nantuko Husk, Liliana, and stuff like that, but there are little things with like Sidisi, Graveblade Marauder, Satyr Wayfinder that just, they work together very well. I was telling you, the cards I didn't play, I ended up cutting because they just didn't feel right. Well, these cards all feel very right together. They interact well together, they play well together, and everything just sort of fires on all cylinders when it goes off right. Please play this deck and let me know how you feel, because I think it's a contender. I think it's really neat. I think it's got a lot going for it, and I could see maybe if it played some main board removal a little bit more than I'm playing here, which is like 0. But very aggressive deck, very, just keeps coming at you deck, very resistant to removal. I think that's important. I like this deck an awful lot, and it's got about 1 million options that I decided not to play. I mean, there's so much that you can do with this deck. So build your own, let me know how you feel about mine, and I'm looking forward to your feedback on this one because I fell completely in love with this deck while I was making it. In any case, if you like the content, like, share, comment, subscribe. It means a lot to us and it helps us so much. We're trying to grow, so please help us grow. And we can do more of these ridiculous little intros we've been doing. In any case, I'm Dev from SVMTG. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching, my wizards.